What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video, and I apologize if anything looks a bit off or not as good quality this weekend. I'm working on a very old laptop in Ohio since I'm traveling for the holidays, but this is the best I can do with the situation that we are in right now. But we'll be back to normal next weekend. We're going to record plays for Week 17 of the NFL season on DraftKings and FanDuel. So if you enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you're brand new, and let's dive right into it. And as always, if you like what you see on the screen behind me, or I guess around me this week, so I don't have the green screen, it's all available completely free for a week over on my Patreon with their free week trials, projections for both sites, DraftKings and FanDuel, my optimizer, ownership projections, cheat sheet going over cash games, tournaments, and core plays, and much more, including my Discord community, which is active 24/7. And we have NASCAR coming up, which I am obviously very excited about. But again, if you want to check that out, you know where to find it. But let's get into it here. And like usual, we'll start with the quarterbacks. And I actually really like this slate. Some really good matchups with elite talents at quarterback and good offenses in general. So it should be a fun one. We have Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Brock Purdy. And while he's not on these other guys' tier, neither is the team, the New York Giants. We do have Tyrod Taylor here because he is free. He's starting. He's mobile. And point per otherwise, he does not look too bad. But let's start top with Jalen Hurts. The tush push merchant. Every single time they're inside the 5-yard line, he's getting you that rushing touchdown, which makes him super safe. No other quarterback. Lamar Jackson is close, but he does not get those rushing touchdowns quite as often as Jalen Hurts. Offers that same floor-ceiling combination that Jalen Hurts will offer you. Plus, he's surrounded by elite talent. He's got a good offensive line. He has A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, DeAndre Swift are all right around him. And this is a dream matchup versus Arizona Cardinals. They are terrible on the ground, which also bodes well for DeAndre Swift. But a 29-quarter implied team total for the Philadelphia Eagles, 10.5-point spread in their favor at home. 250 passing yards, close to 1.5 passing touchdowns per game on the season, and 1 rushing touchdown and 40 rushing yards as well. So like I said, the floor, the ceiling combination offered by no other quarterback. So if you want to play him in cash games this week, I'm certainly fine with it. But I think you could also play him in tournaments and just stack it up with at least one of his receiving options, but even 2 would be fine. Lamar Jackson, a very similar quarterback to Jalen Hurts, where they're not going to get you those 300-plus passing yards weeks each and every single week. 220 passing yards per game for Lamar Jackson, 1.3 passing touchdowns. Honestly, not too far off of Jalen Hurts. He does not have quite the weapons that the Eagles have, but he makes it work, and he can use his legs, obviously. Over 50 rushing yards per game, close to 6 design runs. He just does not get quite the touchdowns that Jalen Hurts has because he always gets those tush pushes, but he's at 0.3 rushing touchdowns per game, so the upside is still certainly there. And this is a big week for Baltimore. They're at home, 25-point implied team totals, not quite as high as guys like Brock Purdy or Jalen Hurts this week, but I do like him here. As long as the rushing yards are there, Lamar Jackson is always going to be viable, so I don't mind him as a pivot off of Jalen Hurts, but he's certainly not going to project as well. Then Brock Purdy, $7,000. Awful Christmas tape performance versus the Baltimore Ravens. 4 interceptions, no touchdowns. Pretty much handed Lamar Jackson the MVP trophy, unless Lamar Jackson maybe happens to slip big time versus Tua in the Miami Dolphins, but I don't really see that happening. So it's really Lamar Jackson's to lose at this point. I believe heading into the week, Brock Purdy was minus 200 to win MVP, and that's obviously not the case. Last I looked, I think it was like plus 1,000 at this point, and now you have CMC and Lamar Jackson as the 2 best odds to win it. But yeah, that was a bad game from Brock Purdy, but no better way to bounce back than to play the Washington Commanders. They just benched Sam Howell. It's going to be Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, which is honestly probably an upgrade. Every single time he comes in, the Commanders happen to score, but a 31-point implied team total for the 49ers here, 12.5-point favorites. So on the road in Washington, 49.5-point over-under, and I love stacking this game up. For some reason, DraftKings refuses to price up the 49ers as much as they should. Like Brock Purdy, I realized last week was awful, but let's be honest, he should be right around $8,000 in this game. They have a 31-point implied team total. This offense has been cooking all season long. Obviously a bad week versus Baltimore, but it happens. He's still averaging 270 passing yards, close to 2 passing touchdowns, close to 10 yards per attempt. Not going to offer you rushing upside like Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts, but he can get the job done with the efficiency. Need 2 elite weapons, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. It really does not get much better than that. So I'll be right back on the Brock Purdy bandwagon this week. Then Tyrod Taylor, he's going to start instead of Tommy DeVito, so I don't mind going there if you need a cheap option. Only a 19.5 implied team total, but for the Giants, that's honestly not too bad. And the matchup versus the Rams, I wouldn't say is super imposing on the season. They're 25th versus quarterbacks allowing 20.5 DraftKings points per game. So if you're looking to spend up at guys like Tyreek Hill or Christian McCaffrey this week, maybe even both together in the same lineup, going the Tyrod Taylor route and stacking up with either a Wan'Dale Robinson or Darius Slayton is a very cheap way to do it and still put a good overall lineup together. All right, so heading over to our lineup, like I said, there is many ways to go. And please don't copy and paste this. I say it every week, but if you were copying and pasting lineups from YouTube, you deserve to lose because I am just simply building this based off some of the players we talked about, putting together using the rules that I use, which is pretty much just pairing 2 options with my quarterback and then finding a running back option, just something nice, sweet, and simple, just to use as an example, and you can apply it to your own favorite plays and lineups this week. But I love Jalen Hurts, but I also like Brock Purdy, and I've been a Brock Purdy stan all season long. So after a big disappointing game versus the Baltimore Ravens, let's give him some confidence, put him back in the lineup. I like him a lot this week. I'm not going to let last week deter me from using him. I'm hoping that keeps his ownership down because this is an absolute smash spot versus the Commanders. Moving over to our running backs, I think there's lots of good options this week, but no one stands out more than Christian McCaffrey at $9,600. And if you are like me that has a Brock Purdy lineup, what should we do right now? Some people don't like to roster the running back with the quarterback, but I'm fine with it because this offense flows through the main guys every single week for the 49ers. Christian McCaffrey is going to get his. He's going to get his 20-plus points. I'm not sure how he's going to do it, whether it's receiving touchdowns or rushing touchdowns, but it's more than likely going to happen, especially in this game versus Washington that allowed Breece Hall to nearly have 200 total yards last week and multiple touchdowns. And this is just, like I said, it's just a dream spot for the 49ers just to bounce back here. 31-point implied team total, 12.5-point favorites. They're on the road, so being at home would be the only thing that would make this even better. But CMC, unmatched by anybody. 5.4 yards per carry, close to a rushing touchdown per game, 5 targets, which equates to an 18% target share, and also half a receiving touchdown per game as well. And Washington is allowing the 5th most points per game to the running back position. So if you're playing cash games, he's a lock. I don't know why he's not $10,000 over on DraftKings yet. We've seen it in the past, and I'm not sure what else he has to do. But the 49ers just tend to be cheap each and every single week, so I would continue to take advantage of that. Over on FanDuel, you do have to pay a pretty penny. He's $11,000, but I do think he's still a fine play over there, just not as good over on DraftKings. As good, I should say, over on DraftKings. And then Kyren Williams, $8,300. I also like him as well. While he doesn't have the name recognition as a guy like Christian McCaffrey, he's also been a fantasy stud this season. It's a great spot versus the New York Giants. He's averaging nearly 100 rushing yards per game, close to 19 carries, 0.8 rushing touchdowns, over 5 yards per carry. And he's involved in the passing game as well. 4 targets on a 13% target share, and averaging 23 opportunities per game, which is actually more than a guy like Christian McCaffrey. It's not like he's inefficient. He's been very efficient. This Rams offense has been pretty good. So while he is not Christian McCaffrey, the numbers are honestly not too far off so far this season. Obviously not quite the touchdowns overall, but on a per game basis, Kyren Williams been very good. And the Giants are currently allowing over 110 rushing yards per game, close to a rushing touchdown, and they're 21st versus running back. So if you do not go the CMC route this week, I think he's a fine pivot in tournaments because I'm not sure a lot of people are going to pay up for CMC and Kyren Williams this weekend. Jonathan Taylor, I'm fine with him as well. No Zach Moss once again this week, $7,300. Just he should get plenty of volume this week, so he's basically just a volume play. And if you're going to use anybody versus the Raiders, I would say it's a little bit easier to run them. They're 22nd versus the run this year and allowing 100 rushing yards per game. Saquon Barkley, if you're just looking for a ton of volume, I don't mind him. He's averaging 22.25 opportunities per game this year and a 17% target share. The Giants' offense is obviously not too exciting, but Tyrod Taylor might give him a little bit of life this week, close to a 20-point implied team total, and the Rams' defense doesn't exactly scare me. But with them being dogs, if they are trailing and they have to throw the ball, he will get those dump-offs. DeAndre Swift, $6,500. If you do not have Jalen Hurts in your lineup this week, I would want exposure to this game. And DeAndre Swift finds himself in a great spot. The only thing he's lacking is touchdown upside. Did get into the end zone last week, which was nice. And he has been efficient with the touches that he receives, typically getting around 12 to 15 carries per game and a couple of targets, 4.6 yards per carry. But he's a 10.5-point favorite at home, 29.25 implied team total. So there's plenty of scoring equity there. And the Cardinals are allowing the most points per game to running backs this season at 123 rushing yards and 30.8 DraftKings points as well. So this is a great spot for DeAndre Swift, and he does project very well. Zeke Elliott, $6,000. A boring play, but with Stevenson out, he has been getting the bulk of the work. He's involved in the passing game. He's obviously going to get the bulk of the carries on the ground. It's probably not going to be too efficient. 3.5 yards per carry. And it's only a 13.5 implied team total this week. So the only reason you are playing Zeke is just for those dump offs, which he has been getting. So the volume has been fine. Javonte Williams. Pretty much all the Broncos are out this week. No Russell Wilson. That's a really weird situation going over there in Denver. And Courtland Sutton is out as well. So I think it's going to be a heavy dosage of Javonte Williams. And this is a pretty good spot at home versus the Los Angeles Chargers defense, who's currently 23rd versus running back. Then we have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I would assume that Isaiah Pacheco is going to be out. I'm recording this early on Friday because I have a flight to take on Saturday. So I'm not going to see the upcoming news in time to record afterwards. But my assumption is, with Jerick McKinnon out and Isaiah Pacheco probably trending out with a concussion, that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be the main back here. There's really not going to be anybody else to challenge him for carries, although I did see he popped up on the injury report with an illness, so he's questionable for the game. I'm assuming he's going to be good to go. If he happens to be out, well, it's going to be a completely different situation, but if he's the main running back here, $5,300 for the Kansas City Chiefs, #1 running back with no competition for touches at home versus Cincinnati Bengals as a 7-point favorite and a near 26-point implied team total versus a below average run defense. It'd be really hard to fade him in cash games. So I think the most popular way to go is going to be Christian McCaffrey and Clyde Edwards-Helaire in cash this weekend. And then we just got news that Josh Jacobs is currently doubtful for this game versus the Indianapolis Colts. And we know the run defense is horrible. 110 rushing yards per game and allowing the third most points per game to the position. And Wesley White's not like an elite talent or anything. He's averaging 4.5 yards per carry on the season, and he should get you 15 plus carries in this one. It's only a 3.5 point spread, and I love the matchup. All right, so moving over to our lineup. Like I said, if you were playing Brock Purdy, don't think you can't play Christian McCaffrey with him because that's still positive correlation. I mean, he's averaging half a receiving touchdown per game, and what is it, like close to a 17% target share, so it's totally fine to pair them together. I'm not going to do it in that specific build because it's obviously going to be super chalky, and this lineup's not going to be anything too crazy, but I don't want to build the absolute chalk cash game build here. So we're going to go away from CMC, and that's not to say I don't like him. He is by far my favorite play at running back, but let's try to get a little bit different. We're going to play Kyren Williams. Like I said, I like him as a pivot, great matchup versus the Giants, and his numbers are honestly not too far off of what Christian McCaffrey is doing this year. Like I said, I'm not trying to compare the two. CMC is in a tier of his own, but Kyren has been a straight baller this season. And let's just assume CEH is healthy for this game. That's going to be the case. Like him a lot here at $5,300. Let's move on to wide receivers. And like I always say, we try to keep this as simple as possible. Stay within your stacks when we're looking at wide receivers because there's so many to pick from week in, week out, because the talent in the NFL at the wide receiver position almost seems unlimited at this point. A lot of it comes down to really who your quarterback is as far as being productive or just having opportunity. Obviously, if you have the money for Tyreek Hill, he's going to be the #1 play week in, week out. Don't really care what the matchup is. Nobody out there can contain him. His speed is just too much for opposing defenders. If we're looking at one-offs for cash games this week, like I said, Tyreek is fine if you have the money for him. Any of the 49er wide receivers would be fine for me. Chris Olave gets a green matchup versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers pass defense. That is awful versus wide receivers this season. I think Rashee Rice is probably the best cash game mid-range wide receiver to roll with this week at $6,900. He's just going to get plenty of targets. Patrick Mahomes really trusts nobody else besides Travis Kelce at this point, and then Rashee Rice as well because Justin Watson, saw him drop a pass. Kadarius Toney's going to be out, and there's just really nobody else. So it's going to be the Rashee Rice show, and it's a pretty good matchup versus the Bengals. Other than that, you're probably looking at cheap plays if you're trying to fit in CMC for cash. So like a Curtis Samuel, Jacoby Brissett. I do think the wide receivers get a bit of an upgrade here. Not really shade Sam Howell too much because he was good for fantasy at the beginning of the season, but there was definitely some struggles near the end. I think Demario Douglas versus Buffalo with them trailing. I think he's a fine play at $4,300 than any of the Giants wide receivers and a good matchup versus the Rams. But overall, since I have Brock Purdy, I love the 49ers guys, so I'm going to be playing Brandon Ayuk. I'm going to be playing Deebo Samuel. A bit pricey, but we didn't go with CMC, so we will save a couple of bucks there. If you have Jalen Hurts, you're looking at A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. If you happen to go the Tyrod Taylor route, if you're feeling a little bit ballsy, you have Darius Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson. You can run back with guys like Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, or Demarcus Robinson, even though they are not listed on here. If you have Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, or Odell Beckham Jr. to pick from. So like I said, try to keep it simple, stay within your stacks, and it makes it a lot easier. All right, so moving over to our build, like I said, we got to stack with Brock Purdy because he's not going to run in 3 touchdowns, so we got to find our points to correlate with them. And it's pretty obvious. That is Deebo Samuel here at $7,700. Then we also have Brandon Ayuk, who I believe is $7K flat, which I don't really understand the price discrepancy by too much because they're pretty similar as far as their production is concerned. I know Deebo is a little bit more versatile in the field with his rushing ability, but either way, it's pretty easy to make that work, and I don't know why Rashee Rice popped up. But that pretty much drained all of our funds, but keep in mind we can use a very cheap wide receiver at this point. We have a tight end who's also probably going to be cheap, and then we have a defense that could be in the 2K range. So I don't think it's going to be as bad as it looks right now. We have to change a few things around. We could have maybe at the drop from Kyren Williams to like a Zamir White just to open up some more salary. I think that's totally fine. But I would like to get a run back option here, and I think Curtis Samuel is going to be my favorite once you factor in the price tag. Obviously, if I could get Terry McLaurin, I would like that more. I do think Pop Douglas will be more popular. But since we're just trying to fill in a stack here at $4,400, let's plug him in for now. Like I said, we're running low on money, so the one guy that I think I'm willing to probably cut is Kyren Williams, and that's not because I don't like him. It's just a matter of I don't have enough money to make it work. And moving on to tight ends, I would say it's really just a matter of how much money do you have to spend if you can spend up. Obviously, Travis Kelce is going to be the #1 option here versus the Bengals. They have been terrible versus tight ends this year. Now you get the best tight end in football. Trey McBride, he's been an absolute stun out there. If you are stacking Philly, he would be my #1 run back option. You also don't have Marquise Brown. He's on the season-ending IR, so you don't have to worry about him getting any targets. George Kittle, if you happen to go the Brock Purdy route, I already have 2 pass catchers, so I'm not going to triple stack, but he would be a viable option. Dallas Goedert with Jalen Hurts. Isaiah Likely if you're going with Lamar Jackson, and then Gerald Everett if you need a punt option. I do like him quite a bit. He has had 8 targets in back-to-back weeks with Easton Stick, and the Denver Broncos have been actually one of the worst teams in the league first time position this year. So I think Gerald Everett, who really is not that bad of a tight end, is actually a pretty solid play. They're actually allowing the most points per game in the position at 16.7, 66 receiving yards, and over half a receiving touchdown. So if you're just looking for a cheap guy that's going to get you 5+ targets, Gerald Everett is in business. And moving on to the defenses, I try not to take too much time here because it's very hard to project defenses. They can be the best defense in the world and the best spot ever. Hey, if you give up 20 points and don't generate turnovers, well, you are an absolute bust. So I always go to the bottom and try to find the first defense that looks viable and play team total-wise. Cannot play the Commanders even though they're in min-price. But I don't hate the Texans versus the Titans, only a 19-point implied team total. They're also at home. The Colts versus the Raiders isn't terrible as well. The one defense that was actually cheap and looked solid as well were the Chargers at $2,900. They're more expensive over on FanDuel at $4,000. They're on the road, which I don't love a mile high, but there's no Russell Wilson, there's no Cortland Sutton, so you really don't have to worry about Javonte Williams. I don't think Jared Stidham, however you pronounce his name, is going to present too much of a threat. I know the Chargers defense is terrible, but something's going to give here and they're below 3K, so I would be fine with it. Alright, so let's finish this build off. Like I said, we're a little bit tight on money, but if we wanted a cheap tight end, I do think Gerald Everett might be our best option here, especially with the matchup. Then we have $3,400 for the last 2 spots. If we plug in one of the cheap defenses that I like, I didn't hate the Chargers. Don't mind the Texans either. It looks like Will Levis is going to start. Don't mind the Colts either. So really it's just a matter of whichever one's your preference. I guess we'll just throw in the Texans at 3K. And if we go that route, we have $3,800 left, which I do know we do have some like Giants wide receivers down there that I think would work. I believe Darius Slayton is in that mid 3K range. Yeah, he's $3,400, so that would be a viable way to go, I would think. If you wanted to take away Kyron Williams to save a couple of bucks, we could go with like Zamir White. If you just wanted to go really cheap there and spend up in the flex spot, that would give us $7,000, which does give us some more flexibility. So if you wanted to go the Travis Kelce route, you could take out Gerald Everett, and then you could play Darius Slayton. I think that's fine as well. So there's several ways we can go. Saquon Barkley, Rashee Rice. That honestly looks a little bit better, but obviously we're getting a downgrade at the running back position. But overall, I think this is a pretty good looking build. You have Brock Purdy double stacked with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. Ran back with Curtis Samuel. Gerald Everett was just the tight end filler, but like I said, if you want to switch things around, you can certainly do that. I like Clyde Edwards-Helaire a lot if he happens to be the lone starting running back in that offense. Obviously, if Isaiah Pacheco is starting, you just really can't play Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but that's going to be an injury situation that needs to be TBT. And the rest is pretty much fillers that I think can be kind of played around with. And like always, just running the optimizer here to see who is popping as of right now. Now, it's Friday, so keep in mind a lot can change by the time Sunday kicks off. But as of right now, these are the guys that are populating the most. Let's pull up the players tab here. And if you ever want access to the optimizer, you can get it in the link down below in the description. But no surprise here, CMC getting a monster amount of usage. And these are not the actual projections, well they are, but I added a little bit of randomness, some stacking settings on there. So it's not going to be like if you just ran a simple optimal. Gerald Everett popping a lot at that price point, which I do understand at his price point with the matchup. DeAndre Swift, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I imagine those 3 running backs are going to be quite popular this weekend based off the matchups, the price tags, and pretty much everything else going on around them. Chargers defense coming up a ton, and Brock Purdy also my most popular quarterback. Bills defense, who I did like, they're just a little bit of expensive at $3,900, so I don't really foresee myself playing that much of the Bills defense. Curtis Samuel, popular run back option with those Niners stacks. Michael Wilson coming up a bit with no Marquise Brown. Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel popping, Pop Douglas, and Darius Slayton look like some of the popular cheap wide receivers as well. If you look at some of the teams popping the most, San Francisco, Los Angeles Chargers, Philadelphia Eagles, Washington, KC, and New York. The games, I assume the 49ers are going to be the top, 95%, Denver and Los Angeles, which is a bit of an ugly game, but some of the pieces at their price points in that game do look pretty solid, especially with the Chargers defense. They're popping up a lot as well, which is going to inflate that number a bit. Philly, Arizona, so really no surprises here. And this should give you guys a good idea, at least on Friday, who's going to end up being potentially popular on Sunday. But with that being said, that's all I got for you guys this week. I hope you did enjoy. I do apologize for the, I'm sure, way less quality type of video this weekend. The lighting probably sucks, the camera, everything else. But we did what we could. Hopefully the information was solid. If you did enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are brand new. I promise the videos are much better than this most weeks. But I'll see y'all next time, and I wish you all the best of luck.